This is Laura McMillan, and this is my paper, A Teacher's Role in Fostering Self-Control and Responsibility in Students. I have my paper pulled up here on the left and my images that are going to be on the right. Classroom teachers often find classroom management and discipline to be an extremely challenging aspect of student instruction. This is because managing a classroom and applying fair principles of discipline incorporates many factors, including the personalities of the students, the teacher, and expectations from parents and administrators. According to Savage and Savage, classroom management refers to the prevention of problems, and classroom discipline refers to my responses when problems do occur. Classroom teachers have to incorporate the intellectual, personal, emotional, and psychological needs of their students into their classroom management strategies. My philosophical vision for managing my classroom includes creating an orderly learning environment, crafting engaging instruction, fostering positive relationships with students, motivating students, and enforcing firm yet kind classroom management and discipline. If all of these elements are applied in the classroom, I will be able to adequately teach my content while at the same time fostering in my students self-control and responsibility. In creating an orderly learning environment, it is important to consider how the classroom will be set up physically. There are many elements of the physical learning environment that I cannot control, such as the size of the room or the number of windows. However, I can alter the arrangement of the student workspaces to facilitate learning. My dream classroom would be set up to have rows of desks on Sundays and in a circle when engaging in classroom discussion on other days. I will put my students in rows on days of direct instruction so that I can focus their attention on what they are learning, and in a circle on days of discussion to encourage student interaction. Students will also be able to move desks into groups for collaborative learning. I will begin the year predominantly with students in rows in order to ensure that I have full control of the classroom before giving the students more responsibility to monitor themselves and their behavior. I would arrange my desk at the back of the classroom so that my conferences with students would not distract others from their group or individual work. And here you can see the tool I have used to create a dream classroom setup. I would also incorporate a feeling of hominess to my classroom with calming colors and a welcoming learning environment. My dream classroom would be filled with books, standing desks, couches, chairs, beanbags, and rugs to convey a feeling of comfort, belonging, and coziness. I would play music that is soothing and interesting to all the students. I would assess the students' music preferences at the beginning of the year in order to improve focus and to lower student anxiety. This level of comfort allows students to feel at ease and gives them the feeling that they are able to voice their opinions and learn in a welcoming space. Another aspect of the physical classroom environment that affects classroom management and discipline is the teacher's management of classroom time. Teachers must maximize both engaged time, or the time students spend concentrated on instructional activities, and academic learning time, the time that students are engaged in these activities and are successfully learning. In order to maximize time focused on academic learning, non-instructional tasks, such as taking attendance and turning in homework, must be done in an efficient way so as not to waste time that could be used for developing critical thinking skills. I plan to maximize my students' instructional time by incorporating these classroom routines. When the students enter the room, they will get their journals out of the bin for their class. This will help the students transition from the hectic environment of the hallway into the classroom. The students will also turn in their homework into the homework file folders that I have on a table at the front of the classroom. This will avoid valuable time being wasted on turning in homework. Once they sit down, students will be expected to be working on their journals, basing their responses on the prompt listed on the PowerPoint. Attendance will be taken once the bell rings and the students are working on their journals. An example of an interaction routine that I will implement in my classroom is a participation indicator. This is figure 3, something I've created. I plan to have a board in the classroom that indicates to the students what type of lesson will be taught today and how they are expected to interact with me and their fellow students. For instance, when students are participating in a Socratic seminar, I will have the pointer on Open Class Discussion, which will indicate to the students that they are able to speak freely without raising their hand. However, when the pointer is on Raise Your Hand, the students will understand that they must first raise their hand before asking a question or making a comment. This will facilitate the dissemination of information and cut down on confusion. One of the most important aspects of classroom management is planning effective and engaging instruction. I must plan lessons that have clear objectives, directions, and vocabulary and terms. I must also pace my lessons so that it is not too quick or too slow, producing frustration or boredom. One of the most important aspects to planning effective and engaging instruction is simply planning. Teachers who plan out their instructional goals, objectives, and activities have much more success, and their lessons provide meaningful opportunities to learn. With careful planning, teachers can gauge students' areas of interest in the subject and tailor instruction to incorporate those students' interests. Something else that takes planning by the teacher is designing a creative and engaging lesson that is student-centered. Direct instruction has its place, but planning lessons where students can choose what and how they learn and engage in discovery helps classroom management because it keeps students engaged in the content, making the lesson more meaningful and the students more focused. Project-based learning is an excellent way to plan instruction that will be meaningful and maintain students' attention and interests. The Buck Institute for Education gives 8 essential elements of project-based learning. Here's the graphic here. In project-based learning assignment, I have to carefully plan a project where students can choose their topic or mode of presentation, giving students agency within the classroom. The projects must incorporate a challenging problem or question, and students must answer this question by engaging in sustained inquiry for an extended period of time. After completing the project, students will engage in revision, reflect on their learning, and present their projects publicly. This will help students to take charge of their own learning and gain important 21st century thinking skills. Apart from planning effective and engaging instruction, I must also foster positive rapport and relationships with my students. One way to do so is to assume the appropriate type of leadership in the classroom. Instead of relying on legitimate reward or coercive sources of authority, students should respect teachers because they have expert and referent sources of power and authority. These sources of authority come from the teacher's confidence in his or her subject matter, as well as qualities that are perceived as those of a good leader, such as trustworthiness, caring, and respect. I can cultivate these types of authority by preparing my lessons and studying my subject matter, being fair with discipline and grading, and being sensitive to students' interests and needs. One way to foster relationships with your students is to avoid deficit thinking. Deficit thinking is the practice of holding lower expectations for students with demographics that do not fit the traditional context of the school system. Instead of using deficit thinking, I should focus on my students' funds of knowledge. What this means is that instead of concentrating on the ways my students do not possess the appropriate tools for learning, I can focus on their particular interests, passions, strengths, and resources that they, and their personal culture, bring to the learning environment. Differentiating instruction in this way will allow your students to know that you care about them personally. Another relationship that is important to foster in your classroom is the relationships between the students themselves. I must facilitate a positive, safe, and respectful learning environment in my classroom by establishing clear rules about how we, as fellow learners, interact with one another. One thing that I can do in my classroom from time to time is to provide lessons on bullying or conflict resolution, especially if I notice that the classroom environment may be leaning towards feelings of hostility. Having students write in a journal to express their feelings is a great way to begin these conversations, as it allows students to reflect on their own and others' behavior and how this makes them feel. One important factor to create a positive classroom management is properly motivating your students. Savage and Savage indicate that students' level of motivation and their behavior are factors that are closely linked. These steps to motivation are identifying reasonable goals for students, getting students to accept the goals as important, and keeping the students engaged. One important aspect of motivation is seeing to students' physiological, psychological, and social needs. As demonstrated in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this was my image on deficit thinking, I missed it. As demonstrated in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a student's physical needs, such as nutrition, rest, comfort, movement, freedom from illness, and sensory stimulation, need to be taken care of first and foremost. An important aspect that I need to be aware of when I'm teaching is the need for sensory stimulation. I need to keep in mind that students need to move around and be stimulated by manipulatives and emotional modalities of instruction. After physical needs, psychological needs must be taken into account. These include feeling accepted, loved, and respected. Teachers can help their students feel this respect and love by helping students be successful in their academic endeavors. This will help students to feel motivated to complete their work. Rather than relying on principles of intimidation or fear to attain the results I require, I should support my students with encouragement and positive rapport. Social needs can be attained by allowing students to learn to communicate with one another, as well as foster a social climate where the students feel supported and respected by their teacher, as well as their classmates. Lastly, teachers must implement clear standards of discipline when all of these classroom management strategies do not prevent misbehavior. It is crucial that teachers examine their own motives when carrying out student discipline. Teachers must not focus on simply maintaining their authority, but instead must always be concerned with instilling kindness, respect, and responsibility in their students. I should always keep in mind that classroom discipline seeks to help students grow and learn and should not seek to be punitive. I should always be striving to improve my time on task, maintain group respect and safety, to keep students' individual needs and interests in mind, and prepare students for future life. It is important to have a graphic list of class standards in my classroom, and here I have that here. If a student violates these standards of behavior, the consequences are as follows. The first consequence is a verbal warning. The second consequence is a conference with the student after the period is over. Third consequence is a conference before or after school. Fourth consequence is a call home to guardians. Fifth consequence is detention. And sixth consequence is administrative referral. If a student's behavior is dangerous, extremely disruptive, or brazenly disrespectful, the student will be referred to the administration and the guardians will be contacted. It is important to have these standards in place so students know exactly what is expected of them. However, it is also important to reestablish positive rapport with a student who has received a consequence, making sure that they know that you will still love and support them. Creating an orderly learning environment, crafting engaging instruction, fostering positive relationships with students, motivating students, and enforcing firm yet kind classroom discipline all contribute to a successful classroom management plan. My ultimate goal as a teacher is to create critical thinkers, lifelong learners, effective communicators, and kind human beings. Each of these elements of classroom instruction can contribute to this goal. As a teacher, I must always keep these goals in mind and learn from my successes and mistakes so that I too can become a lifelong educator and learner. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee.